Well, thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Beer Food Pairings, What Really Goes Best. I'm Greg Berry, Assistant Director in the UAB Office of Alumni Affairs. Just a quick disclaimer, since this is a virtual discussion, please don't be surprised if you hear or maybe see things that seem out of place. It's bound to. I'd also like to ask you to change your name on Zoom so we can better identify our guests. Just go to your name on the participants list, click more, and then enter your name to update it for us. Also, in order to be mindful of our guests, I would like to ask everybody to remain muted. So, versatility and depth. Beer has plenty to offer, but what are the best ways to pair your favorite brew with your favorite cuisine? Tonight, we will explore how to perfectly pair beer with your next meal and, in the process, perhaps level up your dining experience. Our featured guest tonight is Eric Meyer. In 2001, Eric completed an individualized degree from the UAB College of Arts and Sciences. After graduation, he became a firefighter, and he's going to admit he needed a hobby. So that led him to brewing beer out of all places, his garage. While he's still fighting fires, Eric has since grown his hobby into one of the most popular craft breweries in Alabama. He is currently the head brewmaster at Cahaba Brewing Company here in Birmingham. Now, before I turn things over to Eric, I'm going to go ahead and share a poll with everybody. We want to know how you currently pair beer with food. Do you do it all the time? Sometimes you do, but you have a lot to learn. Maybe you try and fail, and perhaps you just don't even know where to begin. So as those keep on coming, I'm going to keep the poll up just for a few seconds. After today's presentation, we will have time to answer your questions, so be sure to submit them through the chat box. And now let's go ahead and take a look at that poll. A majority of you actually don't know where to begin. So hopefully we can shed a little light on this with Eric tonight. And Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you. And what goes best with maybe sushi? That's what I had tonight.
Wow, such a good one. You just got to figure out where you want to start with. What sushi did you have? Are we looking at something with a, oh, there we go. Sorry, the video changed, caught me off guard. Yeah, so a good beer is the one that you were enjoying, the one that's closest to you. The best thing is just trying to see what can complement that sushi. So let's get into this beer food pairings, and let's have a little fun. All right, next slide. All right, so the best thing here, and I enjoy doing this class or this webinar with Tracy here watching. So I have a true professor standing here watching me do this. So this is gonna be a lot of fun for me. So so with beer, we really have to understand what beer is, and you really have to look at those main 4 ingredients which make beer. And the number one, the biggest component, the biggest factor of beer is the water. And so many beers are based on the water of the area that they're from. So you look at those very, very heavy, not heavy, the very mineral based waters coming out of Ireland, which provide a really good stout, or the very light soft waters coming out of Pilsen. So you have a good Czech Pils. So so much of the beer is based on the water. Another ingredient is the malt. You have your barley, your rye, your wheat. You can do a lot of different malts as well. Then you have your hops, which provide flavor. They provide aroma. They help balance out that bitterness. And then you have your yeast, which we always laugh as brewers. We only make wort, W-O-R-T. So we combine these ingredients together, and I'm going to show you here in a minute. But the yeast are what actually create the beer. They're the ones that actually take this sugary liquid that the brewers make, and they turn it into what we call beer. All right, let's go to the next one. So here's a good diagram. Tonight, I am not taking any credit for any of the images that you see here today. Google was my friend. They do a much better than, Google does a much better job than I would with a colored pencil. So here we have a diagram kind of showing the process of how to make beer. It lists 4 ingredients: malted barley, brewing water. In the beer world, we actually call that liquor. Really drives your health department people crazy when you talk about these 4,000 gallon tanks full of liquor. It's just a term that's used in the brewing world, but that's just our hot or cold water. and then your hops and your yeast. So we bring together that barley and that water, bring it in. We mill the malt. We mash it up with the water, let those enzymes work through their sugars, simplify those sugars down. We bring that nice clean liquid across and put it into the kettle where it's boiling there. So we bring it up to a boil. We add some hops to try to balance out the sweetness of the malt and provide some bitterness. Then the late hopping is really, you're adding those hops near the end of the boil. That gives you a lot of your flavor of your beer, of the hops in the beer or your aroma. Then from there, we cool it, we aerate it, because you got to make that wort nice and comfortable for those little yeasts. So we add the yeast into the fermentation and conditioning tanks. We add them in the fermentation tanks, and the yeast work through that wort to create beer. We then move it to a conditioning tank, and then out of there, we rack it, we bottle it. It's called bright beer. We can it. So we're able to move that into packaging to where we can actually come and enjoy it with our food. All right. There you go. So now we really have to look at vocabulary. So, as we're looking at this, there's gonna be some terms that are gonna use multiple times tonight. There's gonna be terms that are used, really anywhere you go when you start talking about beer. And here are your 6 big ones. Light. Well, light. All right. Are we talking about color? Are we talking about body? Are we talking about, less filling, tastes great? So most of the time when you look at the true word of light, when you're thinking about a beer, you're looking at that color of the beer. So then you look at dark, kind of in the same breath. You're going in the opposite direction. The hops, that gives you your floral, your citrus, your piney notes. And those little cones are added, or pellets are added into the boil. They're added in at the end of the boil. They're added into the fermenter. And they provide a lot of your aroma and a lot of your flavor that you're going to get through that is not a malty characteristic. They also provide bitterness, which really helps balance out the sweetness of the malt and provide a nice balanced beer or a completely way out of balance product. Then you have your malt. Malt's kind of giving you a malty note. Now, you always say you can't use the same word in the definition, but when you think about malt, you think about
Well, unfortunately, I think Eric froze up there, and I'm not sure what we can do going on with malt. So we will hope to get him back here shortly. As we wait for Eric to come back, I know he was excited to discuss this topic. Go ahead and start sending some questions over that we can hit him up with as we continue. Once he does come back, we will make sure he's back to where he was talking about malts and being not too redundant about malts. But we apologize for this. This is actually the first for us. And like I said at the beginning, this can just happen. You never know what's going to happen with a virtual setting. And unfortunately, this was the night that it was going to happen. If you guys want to go ahead and, like I said, start posting things in the chat room, we can go ahead and start looking at those once Eric does come back. I wish I was as much of a beer expert as he is. All I can tell you is I know where to find Cahaba Brewing Company, and I know where to find Eric Meyer. But beyond that, I really am not much help when it comes to beer, and I know he's coming right back in. So we will get right back to Eric once his audio gets hooked up. And Eric, when you're ready, you go ahead and start talking again about malt. I think at this point, all you have to do is unmute and you're good to go.
Okay, so I had a flicker of lights here and I lost my modem. So now we're running off the cell phone. I apologize.
Welcome back.
Yeah, let me get my little videos here so I can make sure I look funny. Okay, so you guys lost me in malt. Look at those, the ales, the lagers, how you break those things apart. And a lot of those changes there are by balancing out the malts and the hops to make a little bit different styles. So the last item is mouthfeel. This is that tactile feel. This is that sensation you get when the beer actually enters your mouth. It's from the carbonation. It's from the residual sugars left over in the beer. It can be from a lot of hops, and so that's just that tactile feel that you get. So now we have some vocabulary down. Let's move on. All right, so I'm going to give credit to Randy Mosher here in the Brewer Association. They provide a great document that really walks everybody through different beer types, the impacts of certain things, suggested foods, cheeses, desserts, glassware. This is a wonderful thing to use. Excuse me. I can share this with you. You can look it up on the internet. But this is a good place to have a quick card to go to when you need a little help. So let's go to the next one. All right, so tonight we're going to walk through a handful of different styles of beer. And, the idea is to think about how a style of beer can pair well with your food, and how can it complement your food? How can it help accentuate flavors that your food or even your beer has? How can it truly make a good experience on both sides? And especially when you're enjoying a meal, when you're enjoying company, all these things together just make for such a good experience. The idea, though, is we're just kind of talking about some very generalized things. This slide here, we have blonde. Cahaba makes a blonde, the American blonde. But this style that I'm talking about actually can include American lagers. You can talk about light lagers. You can talk about German pilsners. You can talk about Czech pilsners. You can talk about really any beer that is pale and light in color, that gives you that crisp, refreshing, and they tend to not be hoppy. They tend to not have very many hops in them. So you can really just scratch out blonde off the top if you want, and just write pale, light, not hoppy, and not bitter. But we like to try to give an idea here, so you can see that when you look on the shelf, or you're at your local restaurant and you're thinking about ordering a beer because you're about to have a really good chicken salad. You need to be looking for a beer that is not hoppy, that is not bitter, that is light and crisp and refreshing. And, a blonde can meet that. But at the same time, a good American lager, a good Czech Pilsner, anything that is light and crisp can fit in this category. And this is kind of be this way through a lot of the styles we go through tonight. So with this blonde, the food suggestions are lighter foods, because the blonde is light. It's crisp, it's refreshing. There's not a lot going on there. So it does very well with a light food. A chicken, a salad, salmon. Those are great things that, a lot of times they don't have a lot of flavor. That I say that in a positive way. They have a lot of flavor, but they're subtle. They're light flavors. The same way with the beer. At the same time, the blonde, the lagers go well with fried foods because of the salt, because of the bready character that's usually on those items. Now here we go. We say, well, they also go well with spicy dishes. Eric, this is backwards of what you just said. No, there's ways to complement them, and then there's ways to kind of counterbalance them or contradict them. Well, the blonde, the lagers, they kind of cleanse the palate. So you can enjoy that spicy dish, you can cleanse the palate, and now you can enjoy that side dish, or you can enjoy something else. Same way when you're eating those buffalo wings, you're able to enjoy, it's refreshing, it's cleansing that palate. Now you can have a little celery with it, or enjoy another wing. So that's kind of the idea with a blonde or a light lager or an American lager, or really anything in this classification. All right. So the next one's wheat. Well, it doesn't look a lot different than that blonde, and it's really not a lot different, except for the fact that you just have wheat added into the malt. Wheat is a malt, but when you're milling the grain and you're making your mash, instead of like a blonde being almost 100% Pilsner malt or 2-row barley, you're able to mix some wheat in there, and that wheat really helps kind of smooth out the body and make the beer just feel a little smoother as you're enjoying it. Again, the same characteristics, pale, light, they're rarely hoppy and they're bitter. Now again, that's a generalized term. The bottom picture here down at the brewery, that's a tri-hopped wheat. This is a wheat beer that we loaded up with a lot of hops. So again, it's looking at the generalized term of what a standard wheat beer is. But a good Hefeweizen, a good just wit, a good wheat really falls into this category. Again, with it being light and then smooth and just nice because of that wheat. You want even lighter foods. Greg, this goes well with your sushi, goes well with salads. You can't forget a good German sausage in here. Again, a light sausage. You don't need a big, huge Italian sausage here. You're steaming mussels, so you have a lot of garlic and butter, white wine, those kind of things. This wheat beer does well with that. And again, what doesn't go well with buffalo wings? I mean, wings, they go well with everything. All right. So here we are to an IPA. It is an India Pale Ale. So when you're looking at a menu, you're kind of bored. These are the same thing. These beers, very general, are a little bit bigger ABV. They have a little bit more malt background to them, a malt backbone to them, because an IPA has a good bit of hops to it. There's usually a good bit of bittering hops added into the boil to balance out that extra sweetness of that higher alcohol level. At the same time, there's a lot of hops added into the end of the boil, so you're getting, some beers have a very strong pine note. Some you start getting grapefruit or just some citrus notes, and then they dry hop these beers. So, excuse me, when the beer is getting done through fermentation or in fermentation, you'll add some hops at the end, and that's when you're bringing that glass up to your nose, and you're already starting to get some citrus, some papaya, some pine, some raisin. You're just kind of getting these notes up in your nose. That's from those dry hops, and so that's what you're going to get in an IPA. Now, there's a great double IPA in town, Snake Handler. Good people, does a great job with that. This is just even bigger, more malt, more hops, double. It's like a double cheeseburger. It's got twice everything, which just makes all those characteristics of this beer even bigger. Again, this is generalized. There's a lot of IPAs out right now that are called juicy, hazy IPAs. They look like orange juice. They pretty much taste like pineapple orange juice. They have a ton of hops in them, but they don't have a lot of bitterness. So again, we're looking generalized here. I'm kind of running down the old West Coast style, maybe a little East in here, but of an IPA where you have a strong malt backbone, but then you have a lot of bitterness and you have a lot of hop aromas. So when you're thinking about foods with that, again, I'm talking big, I'm talking bold, I'm talking standing out. So the best way to complement that would be with strong, spicy foods. A good steak, grilled lamb, just something that's got a lot of characteristic with it that by itself, it's wonderful. So you don't want to have that and then just a bland something else. You want to have that wonderful grilled lamb with a beer that can stand its own with it. The other thing is looking at bold, sweet. You can even look at like barbecue with this. Again, buffalo wings. I mean, here, don't worry, I didn't add them in every single food suggestion, Greg, but it might be one of my favorite foods. All right. And then mozzarella sticks. So you get that cheese, you get that the breading, and again, there's just a lot going on with that cheese, and you're able to really enjoy that with the IPA. So you can also contrast all this. You can also flip it all the way around and just have a basket of fries with a good IPA and a little hot sauce. See, maybe I'm starting to compliment again, but that's what makes doing these type things so much fun, because each of us here tonight have different palates. we might be enjoying different beers right now. And when we go out to eat, it's how do you work these things to make that meal, that time of fellowship with, with others, just so much better. So, all right, let's go on to the next one. An amber. This, I have a hard time saying this is not my favorite style, but I'm just going to say this is my favorite style. An amber, the best way to look at this one is the color. You're getting a little bit more red in the beer than the IPA you just saw. Some IPAs will be this color, but you're getting a little bit more amber. There's a little bit more malt here. Most ambers finish malty. At the same time, an American amber has some hops to it, has a little bitterness to it, has a little hop presence, but there's also some malt in here. So you see the characteristics I listed out: strong malt flavors, caramel. Our good UAB alum, Gabe, big guy down there at Fairhope, they make a very good amber that has a nice, strong, malty characteristic to it. So, you're able to enjoy these beers, and the ambers, I think, can really balance in so many different directions because, an IPA is bitter, well, except if it's orange juice, but the ambers, just the style itself is a very wide range. And, when Cahaba was getting rolling out of the garage, the idea was, could we create this amber? It was our liquid amber, but could we create this beer that you could sit and enjoy a couple without any food? Could you sit and enjoy a couple and still enjoy your food, and also really enjoy that kind of hoppiness that allows you to where you want to just have another sip and have another sip. So, your food suggestions here with an amber, it's simple. It's a wide range. There are my buffalo wings, but you got your spicy dishes, and this is my favorite. When you look at a beer like an American amber, and you have just a nice hop bitterness to it. Those hops are there, but they're not just busting you in the face. But there's that little bit of bitterness there with a spicy dish. It's just really, really cool how while you're enjoying the spicy dish and you take a sip of that beer, and how that spiciness just kind of keeps erupting in your mouth, and it just makes, to me, like those wings, those spicy wings, just even better. But you throw in some Thai food here. Yes, it's just so good. All right, we'll go on to the next one. Brown, throwing in some good locals here. A brown is brown. It's a brown ale. It's a very malty beer. Sometimes they can dry out. The English browns can tend to be a little bit nutty. That's the I'm hitting a blank here. No, the English browns can be nutty. Some of them can be sweet. Some browns you catch chocolate. Some browns you might catch a little toffee. But a brown is, I don't know if you can even see it in my face. It's a brown. It's a good beer to drink. But if you notice, the browns, you don't see them a lot in the market. It's one of those beers that you're either a big fan of or you're just not. Because in the market we're in today, people are looking for that bitterness, that hoppiness. People are looking for that clean, crisp. And the browns just kind of fall right in the middle, and they don't always seem to stand out. Now, you can find some hoppy browns out there, and an India brown ale, phenomenal beer. It's just you rarely see them because most people are either looking for an IPA or they're looking for an American lager or something like that. So the browns are there. They're a great thing to really pair with some bigger foods. More of those foods you might be eating in a few months when it gets a little cooler. But your heartier foods, your porks, your roasts, your bigger sausages, those kind of things, just because those things have a lot of flavor. The browns tend to have a lot of different flavors in them, and it's just kind of a good balance so that you don't seem to take something too far off in a different direction. So Tracy might hit me here, but I can't remember. I think it's the Northern English brown ales are nutty and the Southern English browns are sweet. I don't know if we've blocked him from talking, but is that right, Tracy?
I can't remember.
You can't remember. And that's what makes beer so much fun. Is there's so many high rules on things, but really once you get past the first line of the rules, it all just kind of goes away. So all right, we'll go on to the next one. All right, so here we are with stouts. This is the one that I have the most fun with when you're really talking to somebody about enjoying a beer, a new beer, somebody walking into the brewery saying, okay, I've never really had some local beers. What should I try? Because the stout has the most stigma about it. People look at a stout and are like, no, 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 no. I do not drink dark beers. They're too big. There's too much. The ABV is too high. And, they are right for a few of them. Really, a stout is just a beer with a lot of roasted barley added to it. So you start pulling out some of the chocolate notes and some of the coffee that you might kind of meddle in with the browns, but you just load them up with this roasted barley. Now they still have chocolate, they still have coffee, but it's a little bit more towards that kind of iced coffee without all the stuff added in it. It's more like a black coffee. It's more like a cola without all the extras added. And in the bottom right, you see a picture of our Irish stout with in a Guinness glass, and that was a great thing. Again, Google is a wonderful thing because you're able to steal all these pictures. But I'm able to showcase those two beers, or that beer in that glass and Guinness itself. There's a dry Irish stout. This beer is 4.2% ABV. This is one of the lowest ABV beers that we make at Cahaba, which means it also has very light body. It has absolutely no hops. I mean, just enough to balance it so it's not sweet, but there's no hops. It's very low body, very light, very crisp. And it's one of those that, yes, you can drink after you get done mowing the grass, or yes, you can drink on the golf course, or yes, you can drink in the hot weather. It's not a big dessert beer. And that's one of those things to try to really, get people aware of, that the color of the beer doesn't always demonstrate what it's going to taste like. So stouts are normally, if it's a real stout, it's black, it's dark, it's got roasted flavors. There are some white stouts out there. There are some blonde stouts out there where people are giving you these roasted characters, but they don't have that black roasted characteristic to it. So it has a roasted characteristic. It's not black. A lot of times they'll have chocolate or coffee in them. The ABV is variable. That left-hand picture there with our double barrel stout from years ago, I mean, that was a 9-point-something% ABV barrel aged stout. That is a big beer with a lot going on in it. But that, and then you look up at Judge Roy Bean from Fairhope, again, that one's got local coffee from the Fairhope roaster in there. So there's a lot going on with the stouts. The best thing with the stout is, try to ask your bartender, try to ask the person at the grocery store more about it. Read on the package to try to see what it is, so you can kind of balance it the way you want it to be. I mean, you might enjoy opening up a double barrel rye imperial stout out on the golf course. Probably not, but the Irish stout is something that you could. So with that, again, generalize, a stout, you kind of need some rich or some spicy foods, especially when you're looking at that roasted characteristic. You have some barbecue, you even have some Szechuan. The other fun thing here is at the very bottom is I did not add buffalo wings, which it can still go with buffalo wings, but it worked better with desserts. You look at brownies made from stouts. You look at truffles, mousses, all these things that kind of can showcase that roasty, that chocolate characteristic. There's milk stouts where they add a lot of lactose in them. So there's a lot of things that they can play with stouts. People add raspberries and Mexican coffee and all these things because the stout can be a beer that has enough complexity to balance those things. All right, so go to the next one. All right, so the big ideas here are trying to find strengths. How do you work these things, and how do you make those strengths kind of provide a harmony? You don't want to You don't want to be enjoying something and then take a sip of your beer and it just be like, wow, there's something wrong with this product. Either it's in the beer or the food. So you really need to try to find those harmonies so that you can enjoy that. And but look at those strengths. Look at that blonde with that chicken. Look at that big stout with your brownie or your some type of good. I keep thinking about tiramisu. That would just be so good right now, by the way. But you know, with a good tiramisu, you know, and then, you know, thinking about that hoppy amber, you know, when you go to the wing place and you're getting these wings and you're like, hey, do you guys have you have an American amber or hoppy amber? Because that would be really good with these wings we're getting. So you need to look at that. But again, you know, you need to complement each other. Opposites do attract each other. So, and you can kind of play with this. So at the very bottom, I wrote there are no rules. I think I should have made it its own slide because there are no rules. It's one of those to where each of us has our own palates. Each of us enjoys a steak cooked maybe a little differently, and we have to celebrate that. The same way with beers, you know, some people like a hoppy beer, some don't. Some like an IPA that's hoppy, some don't. And it's just trying to see, you know, what do you enjoy, and then how do you marry that up with the food that you enjoy? Because that's the way that you're going to actually enjoy what you're doing. You're going to enjoy that meal you just worked on. You're going to enjoy that beer that you made at home. You're going to enjoy that time you have with somebody and enjoy that company. So remember, there are no rules. My friends will make fun of me because I always say this, but you know, in the world we're in with all these seltzers, you know, they say there are no laws when you're drinking Claws. That's crazy, but you're right. There are no laws. Enjoy, drink local, eat local. So do that. All right, next slide. I have to say, go Blazers. There's my email. Anybody can reach out to me. I'm more than happy to, you know, talk about this. As you can tell, I can talk about it for a little while. And yeah, so I think Greg, you might have some questions, or Jane, and
We definitely do. So I'll kick things off. How often, since you are immersed in beer, when you're not at the fire department, how often do you find yourself pairing your meals with beer?
well, really looking at it, I usually keep a couple different styles of beer down in my fridge downstairs. And, you know, for me, it's my wife is a very patient and loving woman. And a lot of times, you know, I'll come home from the brewery and she's already got a plan for the evening. So for me, it's coming in and having my kids yell, hey, it's Taco Tuesday. And, you know, I'm going downstairs and I'm going to grab, you know, one of the lagers that I've got. So it's really seeing, you know, which route do you start? Do you start with your food or do you start with your beer? There have been times to where you just swing by and see everybody over at Hop City, go by the local pigs, stop by some of these great craft places. You get talking with them. They're like, hey, I've got this really cool, you know, beer from wherever. You ought to try this. And so then you get that, and then you come home and you're like, oh, I'm drinking this. Now, what am I going to make for dinner tonight? Well, you know, I could just do a little chicken on the grill and throw it over salad and we'll make it nice and easy. But this beer has a lot of hops to it, has a lot of things. So now let's spice this meal up. Let's push it up to the next level so that I can enjoy the product and let it kind of complement each other.
So when it comes to wines, a lot of people say you drink white in the summer, you drink red in the winter. Are there beers like that you should really reserve for the cooler temperatures?
I say no. You know, thankful to UAB for years ago, they did some intro into wine classes through their late, I say late night, that sounds bad, but it would be like an after hours classes. So we would go down to UAB where the soccer field is now, and we would meet on Friday nights from 6 until 8, and we would have people walk us through wine every night for six weeks, or every Friday night for 6 weeks. And we would go through everything from the Rieslings to the Pinots to, you know, the Cabs to everything. And the idea and what I took out of that was, you know, the ability, yes, special studies, the ability to really enjoy the product and get out of the product what it's trying to show you. you can really mix those things any way you want. And if you saw that with me in beer tonight, I enjoy mixing those things. So yes, I wear white after Labor Day. Yes, I will drink a stout in Alabama heat, usually in the AC. But again, if you know, I like pointing at Tracy here because this guy is the guy that I look up to. If Tracy invited me over to drink a stout at his house and it was 100 degrees outside in Alabama, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be there ready, excited, and looking forward to that moment. So there are people that say, yes, you should drink lighter beers in the summer. You should only drink stouts in the winter. Yes, Cahaba, we will release barrel-aged beers more around Thanksgiving than Memorial Day. But at the same time, you know, again, it's enjoying today and finding that product that's going to make today even better.
When you are going through the malting process, how much is temperature a factor?
So going through the malting process, you know, that's usually done at a malt house. There's one over in Asheville, North Carolina. Most of them are in the Midwest or over in Europe. And temperature plays a big factor there. I have never malted my own product. I have bought my own malt. I've researched about malting. But yes, temperature plays a big factor. As a home brewer, you can take a base malt and you can put it in your oven. And if you put it in at 350 for 5 minutes, you might get just a little biscuit characteristic. If you put it in at 350 for 20 minutes, you're going to get like a milk chocolate characteristic. If you leave it in there 45 minutes, then you're going to go more like a French press, French roast. You're just pushing water through that coffee. To where if you actually bump it up to 450 degrees in 5 minutes, that same base malt might give you a little bit more plum or some of those notes, and 15 minutes you pretty much have burned it. But you know, it's just, even though the same time that temperature is going to actually cause those sugars to start to roast or to caramelize themselves, and that's really what you're doing through the malting process. You go back a little bit further, they have more to it to kind of get you into the base malt level, and then they roast it from there. But you're really taking those sugars that little seed, that little barley has, and you're roasting those and caramelizing them, or going through your Maillard reactions.
So I'm probably going to show my lack of beer knowledge here with this word, but people are asking about saisons and then sours.
Yes.
People are asking about sours. What do you pair with that?
Yeah. A kettle sour is going to be most of the sours you're going to have here in town. I know Good People has, and I think Ferris have a couple Brett sours, but a kettle sour or a Berliner Weiss, most of those you need to kind of go towards that blonde, that light beer category, because that's its base. We have one called Basic Beach. Creature over outside of Athens, they have one called Athena. These are very clean, crisp, little bit of tart. You have some fruit notes from the souring process and the yeast, but outside of that, that's it. And those fall great into that blonde category. Now, when you start looking at adding all the berries to it, all the passion fruits, those kind of things, now that starts to play in a different realm. And it's just going to be, how do those fruits that are in those, like Trimtide has Paradise now, how do those kind of play into that dish? We're about to release one in the fall called After Dinner Berliner. It has peach and blackberry puree added to it. All right, so how do those peaches and that blackberry really play in? Because that base beer of the Berliner is still there, but those peaches and those blackberries really stand out. The other side is the sours that are really funky. Those are the ones with Brett. Those ones have, I'm gonna wait for Greg for your face to change here, but they kind of have horse blanket smells or barnyard smells to them. Now those beers really just need to, in my personal opinion, those just need to stand alone. There's so much goodness going on with those, a Flanders Red, that you really just need to stop and enjoy that product for what it is. And I mean, if you need some cheeses, you better get something good and strong. If you're going to get some salamis, you better get something good and strong, because these beers have so much characteristic with them. But other than that, with those, that is that wonderful time where you're just able to sit back, you know, and enjoy it, sit back with friends, and just really, you know, enjoy what this product has to give you.
When it comes to storing the beer, is there one ideal temperature across the board, or does it just depend on what you're doing? Amber, blonde, whatever it may be.
Well, storing it, yes. You know, when you look at, again, I'm going general here, so we're not talking these Flanders and those things, but you know, the general beers like we talked about tonight, you know, and not the big stouts, okay? But your general, your blonde, your ambers, your browns, your dry Irish stouts, your IPAs, yes, cold is good. You know, there's a couple things that can really ruin a beer, and that is temperature, and that is oxygen. So, you know, when you start, when you go over to your friend's house and you see beers up on top of their fridge, you probably don't want to drink those, because, you know, that's where the heat's released from the fridge, and those beers are going through temperature changes. You know, if you're at the tailgate, which, you know, I know we're not having any, but you go to the tailgate and the guy pulls that 6-pack out of his trunk and he's like, man, I picked this beer up last week and I threw it in my trunk. Let's ice it down and drink it. You probably want to stay away from it, because just those temperature fluctuations can really mess with the beer. So when you look at draft beer, keg beer, the reason most people say it's better than a canned product or a bottle product is because that beer hardly ever gets above about 45, 50 degrees. When we keg it, it stays cold. It goes in our cooler. The trucks move it from our brewery to the distributor into a cold box at a retailer. They pour it, and there you go. So where a canned product for us is filled cold, it's stored cold. When it goes to the distributor, it's stored somewhat cold, but who knows where you're buying it? You know, whether you're buying it right off the shelf at a grocery store, in the cold section, you know, there's a good chance that sat on the warm shelves in the back of the grocery store. So you're getting temperature fluctuations. The other side is oxygen. Yes, and light will mess it up too. But oxygen will mess it up. So that's why a lot of us have really gotten into cans, because once that can is truly sealed, there is no oxygen exchange like you do have in a cork or you do have in a bottle cap. Now, I'm gonna catch you is that is not the best serving temperature for a lot of these beers. You know, the colder a beer is, the less characteristic you're going to get. A lot of the hops and the malts are kind of subdued by cold. So in the craft world, we laugh at some of the big macro guys because they want to tell you to drink the package when it has the cold label on it and it comes out because it's ice cold. Well, it's because it hides characteristics. So when you're drinking a good local beer, a good local craft beer, yes, I mean, you can sit there and, I mean, again, I'm drinking slowly because I like to talk, but you know, this beer will be good in 45 minutes or an hour. And that shows the quality of a product. So as the beers warm up, they start telling you more about themselves. Stouts are wonderful about that. So a lot of stouts are great at 55, 60 degrees. So if you get a beer, let it warm up, because most places are going to serve it to you as cold as they can. And that's just because they have one cold box that keeps all their beer. It's okay. So let that beer warm up. Put your hands on it. You know, people do that with wine as well, but put your hands on the glass, you can warm it up and really let the beer kind of tell you about itself, before you really start making assumptions about, oh, this stout doesn't taste like anything. Well, it's because it was ice cold, you know? So, yes. Okay.
So when is too warm?
Well, I mean, you normally don't want to drink something it's been sitting on your counter for a month. Now over in England, they drink real cask ales. But normally, you know, people are like, oh, they drink warm beer. It's warm in comparison to, you know, the 33-degree beer that we're drinking. But most of the time, those casks are in cool bars. They're in cellars. They're in places like that. So they are cooler. You know, I've never truly gone through and seen, you know, what a beer tastes like at 65. but usually I'm like a 40 to 50 degree guy, and most of the time it never makes it to 60.
So how about Oktoberfest? Where do those types of beer pair well with? Obviously pretzels and brats, right?
Yes, yes. So that falls into my favorite category. That falls into that amber range. Um, uh, it's a malty beer. Some of them are ale, some of them are lagers, and it's just kind of a play. But some Oktoberfest are very light in color. When you start looking at some of the big commercial Oktoberfest, you start looking at the big festivals in Munich, and they got those big liter glasses, and it looks like you're drinking a lager, a light lager. It is a lager, yes, but a light lager, a light colored beer. To where then you start looking at some other Oktoberfest, like we have one that is a lot bigger. It's 7%. It's amber in color. It's got a nice malt character to it. So Oktoberfest kind of fall in those ranges, and it's looking at the beer and what's going to go well with it. Those big steins, they're going to go great with that very clean brat, that fresh made pretzel with a little salt. To where our Oktoberfest, Cahaba's being bigger and maltier, it's going to go well with those, but it's probably going to stand up even better when you boil some of those brats in the Oktoberfest, and then you have some more characters coming out, and then you start adding the spicy mustard to it, and then you start doing the pretzel bun on the brat because there's just more things going on. So it's just kind of looking at the beer that you're enjoying or the food you're enjoying and trying to get a beer to pair up with that.
Perhaps another beer ignorance moment for me. How do Märzen
Oh, it's all right.
food?
How's a Märzen, M-A-R-Z-N?
Go with it.
Yes. So
M-A-R-Z-N.
yes. So that's an Oktoberfest is a Märzen. A lot of times the Oktoberfest are what are served in the September and October region or time. But those beers are normally made in March, and then they're lagered until the festival season. And the idea was if I remember the story very generally, it's a king's celebration for his son's wedding or something like that, and that's what started all these big parties. So usually it's the beers. They're going to put them away. They're going to brew them in their I guess that would be early spring. And then over in Europe, they drop them down into their cellars underground, and those things would sit at nice, cool temperatures and just clean themselves up. Lagers tend to be just a little bit smoother, a little bit cleaner finish. So those things would finish, and then come, festival time, it was time to pull those things out and enjoy them.
So Eric and I have had conversations about this. I'm not much of a beer guy. I'm more of a bourbon and wine guy. So if I want a gateway beer with that perfect food, which road should I go down to have that perfect pairing?
Wow.
The buffalo wings, right?
Yeah, you got to go buffalo wings. That's a tough one. Because if you have somebody who's not into beer, I'm going to be completely honest here. My wife does not enjoy beer. But the ability for, like, right now, these sours, a fruited sour has really brought a lot of people over from the wine world. They're huge wine fans. They've never really found a beer they like. A fruited sour, or just the regular Berliner Weiss has brought some people over. So that is a nice one for somebody to be introduced into beer. And then with that, I would probably work in, I'm trying to think, like what's popping into my head is like a good brick oven pizza, probably with, like, I'm thinking, like, I don't know, maybe a little bit of the white Alfredo sauce with maybe just a tad of some spinach and some chicken. Maybe that might be still too much, but I'm just thinking that nice kind of that brick oven kind of smell with it could balance out that sour a little bit. That could be fun. But yes, some buffalo wings. Yeah.
So we will never know what Blaze would find as his perfect drink. But maybe an amber?
Yes. So we had some hopes years ago of and some of y'all have hopefully enjoyed the Comeback Brew. Yeah. So we were running down that amber range, just because for most beer drinkers that one can toe the line. That can toe the line for somebody who's looking for more, as well as the person that's like, I really only drink macro beers, but I want to drink something local. And yeah, let me jump in here, and this really can entertain both of us.
Awesome. Eric, thank you so much for joining us to discuss the best ways to pair our favorite food with our favorite beer. Again, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you guys.
And just a heads up to our guests, a recording of today's webinar will be available tomorrow. And you can hear more about Eric's journey as part of the Green and Gold podcast. He was a guest on episode 10 way back on January 6th. I bet you Eric remembers that. Tells us a whole realm of things, how he got into beer, brewing, and where Cahaba Brewery is going. Listen in on his episode, many others, on Spotify or iTunes. Even visit alumni.uab.edu/greenandtold. The National Alumni Society would like to invite everybody to take part in our 2020 annual meeting. Next Thursday, our featured guest will be UAB football coach Bill Clark. You'll also get a chance to be introduced to the 2020-2021 UAB National Alumni Society Board of Directors. And we also have a couple other webinars coming up that you might be interested in. On September 1st, we'll be getting interactive, maybe even work up a sweat with Dr. Fred Gilbert as we explore how to age-proof your body. Then on September 10th, join us for estate planning tips and tax considerations to learn more about key concepts, core documents, and benefits of philanthropy in your estate plan. You can register for all of our webinars and the annual meeting at alumni.uab.edu. Also, interact with us on social media. We can be found at UAB Alumni on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. On LinkedIn, looked up UAB Alumni Career Community. Finally, if you want to email us, check us out, alumni@uab.edu, or look us up at alumni.uab.edu online. Again, thank you all so much for joining us for tonight's discussion with Cahaba Brewing Company's Eric Meyer. Eric, thank you so much. Good night. We hope to see you soon, and go Blazers.
Go Blazers.